Let me do that. Hello and good morning. We're going to start this one more time. Ride goes, ride goes. We are at 1.8 watts per kilogram as we roll out. Just getting a couple things shared out to our partners, and we will get started here. Go ahead and close all of those tabs. And here we go. All right, we are riding at 1.8 watts per kilogram, everybody here on course. So please stay with that pace for us today. That should definitely help keep us all together. I'll make sure we've got 1.8 watts per kilogram, everybody here on questions that we've got. And we'll go from there and we'll get started on our talk today. And that should definitely help keep us all together. All right, that looks good there. Good. Stream looks good on that side. Restream is looking good. Okay, we are good to go. Welcome to In the Feed Zone. Let me get to our first slide here. Boom. Welcome to In the Feed Zone. You can find In the Feed Zone here on Fridays at 5:45 Pacific, 8:45 Eastern, and 13:45 GMT. So if you're on those times, or if you're watching this after the live feed, thanks for joining in. We're going to go ahead and jump in straight into our topics today. I think everyone's going to find this interesting, but before that, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Jason Flores. I go by JFlow here on Zwift. So if you're on course, give me a ride on, I'll give you a ride back. Even you, Pete, I'll give you a ride on back too. All right, here we go. Quick medical disclaimer that this is only purpose of this live stream is to educate and to inform, and it's not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or qualified medical professional. And this live stream is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or professional advice. Okay. Quick goals of this live stream today, as usual, is to present current articles in the media covering food, hydration, and how it relates to endurance in sports. It's also to open a dialogue for viewers to ask questions and to get advice about and talk about their experiences. The article today is very interesting. We're going to be talking about how to put an end to mid-season weight gain. Depending on the season, here in the north hemisphere, we are looking at the end of summer, and here we are looking at mid-season, towards the end of the season. And it's a really good article that Chris Carmichael wrote over at CTS, Carmichael Training Systems. He's the head coach over there, about putting an end, or just some ideas or some topics that we can use as we finish up our season to make sure that we are doing what we need as far as to keeping all of those things on track, excuse me. All right, so just a quick overview of what we'll be going over today is we're going to talk about how mid-season weight actually can be a positive thing, how we can get an increased collagen stores can help, increase plasma volume, and increase muscle mass could actually all be positive things here. Also, we could take a look at some causes of mid-season weight gain. Failure to apply progression principle, I'll explain that. Caloric overcompensation. And then social drinking habits and eating, as well as poor recovery habits. And then what not to do if you're gaining mid-season weight. So we'll kind of hit on all of those kind of real carefully here as we talk. And so essentially the topic is all around mid-season weight gain and how it could actually be a positive thing, or how it could actually be a positive thing. And that while endurance athletes generally benefit from being lighter, leaner, in instances, weight gain can actually be a sign of progress, meaning through your season or through your summer, you could actually get an increase in performance this way. And we'll talk a little bit about those. And the first topic being about increased glycogen stores. So essentially, the more you train, the more glycogen muscles that you store. But essentially, there is an upper limit to this glycogen storage, about 500 grams or about 2,000 calories. So people don't typically automatically max out their storage. So it's really a response to training. So as you train more, you're able to store more glycogen as well. So if we think about the math, each gram of glycogen stores about 3 grams of water, so about 500 grams of carbohydrate stores. So we're looking at about 1,500 grams of water with it. So the 1-to-3 ratio, we're looking at 2 kilos. We're thinking like, oh, that's my 2 kilos. It's all glycogen store. Here the thing is we always have some amount of glycogen store in the body. So we need to make sure that we don't really know where that's at. So really we're trying to just kind of top things off. You really hear that term a lot about topping glycogen stores off, but it's just important to know that that's part of the equation. Just a quick message to everybody down there in our group ride that is a great pace. Everyone's staying right together. So the second thing to talk about is increased plasma volume, and this is improved aerobic fitness and acclimation, essentially, to aerobic fitness. So as you train more, you actually have an increased amount of blood. The plasma volume that we're referring to is actually the amount of blood that's in the body. And so what this is that this can, as you, for example, work out more, you're able to kind of push that heat away from the body as the blood passes through the muscle, and it actually works as a heat sink. So as you increase your plasma volume, you're increasing your ability to kind of remove that heat from the muscles, from the body, as it circulates through working muscles. It's essentially absorbing heat. So really good there. So the third thing, a positive it could be, is increased muscle mass. And yes, you may have increased muscle mass, but this can typically be a good thing over the year if we're doing things right. So when we start out working as new athletes, there's often a rapid weight loss, and then weight typically stabilizes, but body composition can change, meaning that you can decrease fat and increase muscle. Those are really important things as far as moving forward, looking into your progression over a season. This can also happen with experienced athletes as well. Depending on the athlete, you may get leaner and gainer with enough muscle mass to offset the loss of fat weight. So that means the number could stay the same on the scale, but in fact your fat percentage and your muscle mass percentage can shift. So that is something to consider. So causes of unwanted weight gain during the season is that you get too excited about any of the sections of the above, about the plasma volume, the glycogen storage, or just minor day-to-day fluctuations in your weight, which are hopefully only about 1%. So you're looking at anywhere from 1.5 to 3 pounds per day for about 165 to 200 pound riders. So you're looking at 2 to 4 pounds at the most. So unless you're specifically training for muscle mass, like for off-season weight gain through muscle, you're really not going to gain 5 pounds of muscles in 2 to 4 weeks. And if your weight has increased more than 3%, you're looking at 5 pounds for a 165 pound athlete. During the summer, something may be going on. And the question is what's going on, and what can we find out exactly what's happening? So here are a few reasons that athletes can inadvertently gain weight during training. So some of the topics include, failure to apply the progression principle. So your question is, what's the progression principle? So essentially, as you progress in your training, you essentially let's go back a little bit. So to improve your fitness, you have to increase your workload, right? So in order to make progress, so more and more training, but essentially in time crunch athletes, training time or volume is typically constant, meaning that you just can't add more training time to increase your workload. That means if you need to examine your training intensities to see if it's time to increase them in a variety of ways to get more performance out of those same calories. If you're training with outdated intensities, you may not be burning as many calories as you think. So the question is, what we would like to insert here is to make sure that you're testing yourself appropriately. We're thinking about every 4 to 6 weeks, making sure you have those intensities that are appropriate for the fitness that you're at, and that the amount of calories and so forth that you're putting in. So this is essentially that as you progress, your intensities also progress. So just making sure that FTP doesn't get stale. All right. And so the other one is, we see this all the time. It's caloric compensation or overcompensation. And that as your training load does increase, intensity increase, where time stays the same, they increase caloric consumption. And a lot of it goes with the work and reward mentality, something like, I train hard, so I should be able to eat whatever I want. So other times it comes from a misconception about how food is required to optimize post-workout recovery, and you need that amount of food all throughout the day. But in fact, it is along those terms, but I think there's a way to avoid that. Both in season and out of season, you could focus your calorie consumption actually before, during, and after training, and then the rest of the day you would actually just eat per normal. That means adding a snack before your training, additional calories during your training and some recovery specific calories in the 60-minute post-workout window. And that would be it. Making sure you get those extra things in during that, let's say, hour before, hour after, and during. You're looking at increasing those calories during that time versus the rest of the day. And you would eat your normal meals throughout the day otherwise. So the additions typically anywhere from 100 to 200 calories via sports drink or gel or bar or whatever it may be during your workout to get the most out of your workout, ride or that sort of thing. And then after that, it would be a matter of going from there. You would be able to just have a normal day. So it's harder at the end of the day versus trying to catch up. And definitely good tips and information here for that too. So a couple other tips would be social drinking and or eating. Essentially, community is yeah, good questions. Social eating and drinking community is one of the biggest draws of all this endurance sports. Although we may spend long hours by ourselves training through the winter, it's so that we can enjoy our sports during the summer and then when we are out when the weather does get better. So many of these include get-togethers, cafe stops, beers after workouts, and meals and those sort of things. Obviously, we don't want you to skip these sort of things, but the best part, this is some of the best parts of being an athlete, being able to indulge and do those things. But just recognize that these social occasions can contribute to in-season weight gain. So very, very good information there. And then kind of moving on, looking at recovery habits. And this is kind of a really good one to touch on because a lot of times there's questions on what we should do for post-recovery and kind of trying to understand the intricacies of it. And a lot of it has to do with what happens afterwards. So essentially, when you do train, it leads to inflammation of the body. And we're looking for a response for the body for it to respond and grow stronger from. So we break it down, it gets built back up, and essentially we're looking for it to grow. And it's just a normal and essential part of adapting to this training stress. However, recovery habits can differ between minor inflammation from like an easy zone 2 easy ride workout to a more continual inflammation that could definitely lead to weight gain, meaning not recovering properly from a workout before. So sometimes you can find that even though a rider may be working out very consistently, plenty of hours, that weight gain seems to still come on. And a lot of times it could be signs of what can be looked into or categorized as overtraining. So something to look at if a rider is chronically under-recovered. Athletes who are not adequately recovering from exercise and lifestyle stress, so that's total everything. That's life stress, family stress, work stress, everything. They have elevated levels of a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol essentially controls your body's ability to recover as well as get rid of the inflammation after a workout or after any type of stress to the body. So this elevated level of cortisol can be associated with food cravings, fat storage, and your body is just working completely backwards in trying to get the job done as far as, you know, using the right storages or fuels for your workouts. It can leave athletes feeling very flat, very tired, mentally drained, all kinds of things like that. So if you're gaining weight and you've been training either the equal amount or you've increased your training stress, it may be worthwhile examining whether your food choices and eating habits have also changed recently to kind of see if there's something else going on. And maybe needing to adjust that, whether it be decreased intensity or decrease overall time, it can definitely make a difference here. So some kind of wrapping up what not to do if you are gaining mid-season weight. So a lot of times people do get panicked when you jump on the scale and for whatever reason the numbers are up, and it could just be a bad day, and then mentally it kind of puts a trip on you, and so you don't want to do some of these things to like quickly counteract this weight gain. And so it's making sure that your caloric intake is aligned with your expenditure. Essentially, the amount that you're putting into the body to fuel your body for your workouts and your day are balanced with the amount of intensity and stress that you're putting on the body. Overcompensating or excessive social consumption, for example, and also those are places where you can get extra amount of caloric intake. So focusing on recovery strategies is really important. If you remember last week, we talked about one extra thing on top of all of this is the amount of sleep that we're getting, as well as our strategies like post-recovery, like foods and those sort of things that we've talked about before. What we don't want to do is dramatically increase our training load, even though in an effort to lose the weight. So essentially, you've got this high training load, and you're going to bump that even more, even though you don't have too much time, and so you're making sacrifices, whether it be by family or by work, and you're trying to squeeze more time in. And so we don't want to do that in effort to lose the weight. So if your training workload is appropriate for improving your performance, is most likely it's just typically higher for the reasons that we talked about at the very beginning, which is the glycogen stores, the plasma volume, and the muscle mass. Those could be some of the reasons why the number is a little bit increased. So increasing it further for the purpose of creating a caloric deficit, that is your workload, to diminish it could diminish your performance gains, essentially making you overtired, insufficient to produce much more weight loss because you're essentially under recovered. The other thing to consider is having just fun during the summer season. Maybe worth gaining these few pounds, and during the off season is a time, or as we lead up through the base period, is where you can kind of get grouped up or kind of get focused on getting to your year weight, the goal weight for the year, and then kind of just let it go and allow it to kind of make its own way through your wax and waning of training during the season. So one thing to remember is that a lot of us aren't making a living basing on cycling, running, triathlon performance. So if your performance is satisfactory and you're happy, you definitely want to be happy, you want to be recovered, you want to make sure that you're engaged at home, and those sort of things. So as long as your performance is satisfactory and you're enjoying your engagement through your sporting community, the few pounds really shouldn't end up getting in the way. So some really good topics here today that were covered, and just kind of a quick overview of those is, you know, there are some positives to mid-season weight gain here in the cycling kind of realm, and the weight gain can be a positive thing. Essentially, we talked about increased glycogen stores, essentially having those stores on to be able to do the efforts that we have, increased plasma volume, essentially being able to cool ourselves, and increased amount of blood volume, increased muscle mass, essentially getting stronger over the course of a year. And some of the causes of unwanted mid-season weight gain, like the failure to apply the progression principle, essentially, you know, increasing the amount of intensity and stress throughout a period of cycling or a period of workout progression, looking at caloric overcompensation or an increase in calories for the amount of workout that we're doing, essentially giving ourselves kind of a mental break. Also indulging in social or drinking, you know, indulgences outside or in excess. So kind of need to keep that in balance. And then lastly, of course, poor recovery habits. And then we also touched on things to do, not to do if you're gaining mid-season weight, which was to kind of overreact it or try to jump on the other end and just try to blow it out with all kinds of TSS work, you know, increase in stress load and that sort of thing. So definitely really good information as a whole. Let me click to our last slide here, which will give us, if you want the full article, which I'll post here in our talk after the live cast today. It is from Carmichael Training Systems. Really great information across the board. And then I'll jump over to our live feed to see if there's any questions on that end. But if anybody here on Discord, I should be able to hear everyone here. If you have any questions here, let me see what we've got. Give me a second. All right. So one of the questions that we got here on Zwift Live was that why does VO2 work make one kind of more hungry than SST and threshold? What it has to do with is the amount of essentially carbohydrate stores that we're reaching for. So if we think of a graph being kind of on the left, on the low end, zone 2 work, where there may not be a whole lot of fueling needed. On the threshold end, you actually may need more carbohydrate stores, or there's a balance between us using fat and carbohydrate as a fuel. But where we get to VO2 max or even anaerobic efforts, what we're looking at is essentially pure carbohydrate stores that were being used. That's why there's a finite amount of time that we're able to do those intervals. So for example, for a VO2 max interval, we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 8 minutes considered the VO2 max, or the max aerobic effort that we can put out. So you're looking at that amount of essentially sugar burn that we can put, and that's one of the reasons why we train at that interval, in order to maximize that power output. And so essentially we are burning essentially all carbohydrates. So we move that over just one even further to lactic thresholds, which is anaerobic efforts above VO2 max. You're looking at a pure anaerobic effort being all carbohydrate stores. And then we've got even a higher level of that, which is neuromuscular or full sprints. You're looking at a whole nother system called ATPPC, which is creatine phosphate. But for the simple words of is that there is a super finite, less than 30 seconds of energy there for you to be able to just pull for, like, run from a lion, sprint away, that sort of thing. And that's the sort of thing that we want to be able to save for final bits and efforts. So building foundations and blocks above that is what would help us be able to save those final stores, because those are all finite amounts. And so going back to the question, essentially why you do have higher hunger is because you are actually draining your stores more completely during those efforts. But really, really good questions. Let me make sure I'm not muted for, let's see, for our talks on this end. Should be good. Yeah. All right. So if there's any questions here on Discord, I can answer those. But really great group today. Everyone's staying together here, there on our group ride. We've got a good amount of viewers. I'm just going to double check to make sure none of our other panels had questions, but things look good on that end also. All right. That looks like that's about it for today. So I do want to thank everybody for joining us here on Swift Live and in the feed zone. Don't forget to check out the rest of our schedule today. I'll just jump over to it really quickly. And you can catch any of our broadcasts all throughout the week. The Euro Decaf Ride and Magnus Mondays on Mondays, Cat and Mouse and SLTC Time Trials on Tuesdays, Coffee Rides early morning on Wednesdays with What's Up with Power with Justin, Skills and Drills Ride on Wednesday, Thursday Night Throwdown on Thursdays, here in the feed zone on Fridays, the women's race on Saturdays, and also our normal cat and mouse race or coffee ride on Saturdays. So really full schedule. We're putting a good amount of information out there. If you'd like to add anything or anything that you'd like to see more of, definitely let us know. We're always open for that. And just remember that we are here for the community, and we are by the community. And if there's anything that you'd like to add, definitely let us know. Again, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Alex, for that. That was an interesting piece on nutrition and fitness training. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't ask any questions, but it was very quick. My weight kind of stabilized over the last year or so, and the point that Pete about the muscles and putting weight on through muscle growth or whatever, that seems to fit my experience. So my body shape definitely has changed a bit. So I can take comfort from my scale still showing the same weight for the last 6 months or so.